Hello, everyone. Welcome to MMA at Midnight. I'm your host, Shant Yeretzian. In this week's episode, we're going to preview UFC Fight Night Belem, Lyoto Machida versus Eric Anders. We're going to break down that fight and the other ones on there, and we're also going to have another segment of Midnights of Our Past, and this week's is going to be UFC 129 GSP versus Jake Shields, so stay tuned for that. Let's get started with the UFC Fight Night in Belem. This one has a lot of good fights on it. We're going to start with some of the undercard fights. We have Damir Hadzovic versus Alan Patrick. Damir Hadzovic, if you don't know him, he's the Bosnian Bomber, his nickname. In his last fight, he had a knee KO versus Marcin Held. That was a really nice knockout. It reminded me a lot of Joakim Hansen knee knockout versus Imanari. It was awesome. Marcin Held was going for like a takedown, or he might have been going kind of like, he was kind of turning, maybe going for like a leg lock or something. And yeah, Damir just landed a sick knee on him that knocked him out. So if you haven't seen that, check that out on Fight Pass. That one's a sick knockout. And he's fighting Alan Patrick. Alan Patrick is on a 2-fight win streak. His last 2 fights, he's beat Stephen Ray and Damian Brown. So keep an eye on for him, see if he can keep that momentum going, and also keep an eye on Damir, see if he can come out, maybe get another knockout or, you know, another impressive finish or fight performance. In the next fight, we have Sergio Moraes versus Tim Means. Sergio Moraes is coming off that knockout loss versus Kamaru Usman, so it'll be interesting to see what corrections he makes, how he comes out, if he's a little tentative or if he's going to kind of push the pace a little bit. Tim Means, he's kind of had a little rocky road, you know, but he's always been a game fighter. He's one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. But he lost a split decision to Belal Muhammad in his last fight. So I would say he kind of, you know, this is a big, not necessarily a must win for both these guys, but both these guys definitely need a win, you know, coming off losses. In that that's a deep division, so if these guys want to stay relevant, they're definitely gonna have to get a win to keep relevant. In the next fight, we have Thiago Santos versus Anthony Smith. This is a really good fight. Thiago Santos is on a 3-fight win streak, and all of them are finishes by TKO. He had 2 losses before the 3-fight win streak. One against Gegard Mousasi, and the other one was against Eric Spicely. But since then, yeah, he's been on a tear. That 3-fight win streak. They're all stoppages. You know, I feel like he's really built up some good momentum, and Anthony Smith is also on a 3-fight win streak, and all of his are by knockout. So his last 2, in the last fight he knocked out Hector Lombard. Before that, he got that head kick knockout over Andrew Sanchez, and both of those were late. I believe they're both 3rd round knockouts. So Anthony Smith is dangerous late into the fight. Don't sleep on him. He's big for the division too. Thiago Santos is a big middleweight as well, but Anthony Smith is a tall dude. He's big for that division. Looking for this to be action. Like I said, both these guys on 3-fight win streak, finishes, they're strikers. It's going to be an exciting fight. Definitely tune in for Thiago Santos versus Anthony Smith. In the next fight, we have a heavyweight fight with Tim Johnson versus Marcelo Golm. Tim Johnson, he's kind of had some mixed results. He's a tough fighter. He always brings it. He's a strong wrestler as well. But a lot of decisions, you know, he's kind of a mixed results depending on who he's fighting. Marcelo Golm is a young Brazilian. He's 6-0. He's undefeated. In his first fight in the UFC, you know, he beat Christian Colombo, and it was a good finish. It was in Brazil also, and the fans seemed to go nuts for him. Even though this was his first fight in the UFC, maybe they didn't know who he was. Being a young guy, you know, the fans were all behind him. You know, he seems like genuine, friendly guy. So the fans loved him. So look out for the fans cheering for Marcelo Golm versus Tim Johnson. That's going to be exciting. You know, everyone loves to watch heavyweight fights. So Tim Johnson's hard to put away. He's hard to finish. But I'm picking Marcelo Golm with the knockout or TKO stoppage. I think his youth, athleticism, his power, his speed, I think is going to be a little too much for Tim Johnson. In the next fight, we have Desmond Green versus Michel Prazeres. Last two fight, Michelle beat his opponents by north-south choke. So this dude's got an intense north-south choke. The way he was able to take side control and then turn, lock up the arm, is really impressive. He did that against Josh Berkman, which Josh Berkman's been around for a long time. It's tough to catch a guy like that in submission. So keep an eye on it. If he gets this to the ground, he might look for that north-south choke again. Desmond Green, he lost his last fight to Rustam Khabalov. But look for him to rebound. Look for him to try and make a name for himself off this. He is on the main card. So definitely keep an eye on that fight. I feel like if he can get a win over someone like Michel Prazeres, who has some momentum behind him and in front of his hometown, that might help build his name a bit. So keep an eye on that fight as well. We also have a women's fight on the main card with Valentina Shevchenko versus Priscilla Cachoeira. Valentina Shevchenko is coming off that split decision loss to Amanda Nunes for the belt. So let's see if she can rebound, how she's going to look. Priscilla Cachoeira, it's her UFC debut. She's 8-0. She has a lot of finishes by knockout, TKO, so look for her to be striking, be aggressive. And we know Shevchenko has a really solid striking game, jiu-jitsu game. She's really well-rounded. So this should be an exciting fight. So keep an eye on that women's fight. In the co-main event, we have John Dodson versus Pedro Munoz. Don't sleep on Pedro Munoz. This dude is on a 4-fight win streak. 3 of them are by guillotine choke. If this dude gets Dodson's neck, man, I think it's going to be over. His last fight, he guillotine choked Rob Font. Like, Rob Font's no joke. Like, this dude, 3 guillotines in his last 4 fights. So keep an eye on that. John Dodson's coming off that split decision loss to Marlon Moraes. So John Dodson, you have to assume that he's feeling like this is a must win. He needs to get a one in the W column right now, and John Dodson hasn't had a finish since he fought Manny Gambirian. So I wouldn't be surprised if John Dodson actually comes out aggressive. Maybe he wants to make a statement. People are kind of forgetting about him. He's kind of lost that star power. It's kind of fizzled down. No one really talks about him anymore. So if he wants to get people talking about him, he needs to come out with a finish. He needs to be aggressive, and he needs to go for a finish or something like that. Like I said, I think Pedro Munoz, with his 4-fight win streak, if he leaves his neck anywhere, if Dodson leaves his neck out anywhere, man, Pedro Munoz is going to grab that thing. Let's move on to the main event. We have Lyoto Machida versus Eric Anders. This is going to be a great fight. Eric Anders is 10-0. He's undefeated. He's a young guy, up and coming. He used to play football in college. He's very athletic, powerful. He has a KO win over Rafael Natal. Machida's on that 3-fight losing streak. His last 2 were by knockout, so that's not good. He got knocked out by Derek Brunson in his last fight, and the fight before that he got knocked out by Yoel Romero. So I have to assume this is a must-win for Lyoto. Lyoto needs to win this. It's sad to see Lyoto kind of been on this losing streak of his, because he is like a true martial artist. He's a nice guy. You want to be get behind him, but it's been tough for him. So let's see how he deals with Eric Anders. Like I said, he's powerful, young, athletic, aggressive, undefeated. He's got knockout power. So I think Machida's got to fight smart, but he also has to finish Eric Anders. He can't let Eric Anders stick around. If Machida sees an opening, he's got to go for it. So it's a really good card from top to bottom. The fight night, UFC Fight Night Belem. So definitely tune in for that on Saturday. That should be a lot of fun. Let's get into this week's segment of Midnights of Our Past. This week we have UFC 129's GSP versus Jake Shields. This one was in Toronto. This was the biggest UFC event. They had that huge arena, the Rogers Center. Record-breaking, over 55,000 people were in attendance. It was amazing. If you've never seen this event, I'm going to give you all the reasons to watch it, not just because the atmosphere, the way the arena, the fans, and it was nothing like that before for UFC, and honestly since. So I'm going to give you some more reasons with all the great fights on here too. So let's start off on the undercard. This one had a lot of amazing fights on the undercard. Definitely worth watching it all, the whole card from top to bottom. You had Yves Jabouin versus Pablo Garza. Yves dropped Pablo Garza with leg kicks multiple times. He dropped him, like he was chopping him down over and over again. And Pablo Garza ended up finishing him with a flying triangle, which was sick. You know, he ended up kind of like baiting him almost. Then when he got close, he tied him up like with the triangle, pulled him to the ground. It was really slick move by him. It was awesome. That was really impressive to see. In the next fight, you had John McDessie versus Kyle Watson. Kyle Watson was actually on Team GSP during the Ultimate Fighter. So he did have some experience with GSP and his trainers. You know, John McDessie trains at TriStar with Firas Zahabi. John McDessie, in this fight, he really was showing off his great his karate skills. He had some really good kicks. He just kept landing. Kyle Watson kept leaving his chin up in the air, just eating punches. Every time he would come in, McDessie would land that counter hook right on his chin. Like Kyle Watson was just leaving his chin right up there, and he ended up McDessie ended up catching him with a spinning back fist that knocked him out cold. It was one of the best spinning back fists I've ever seen. It landed like flush right on his jaw, like his forearm, and just knocked him out cold. If you've never seen that knockout, John McDessie versus Kyle Watson, please watch it. It's a sick knockout. See, we had Ivan Menjivar versus Charlie Valencia. Ivan Menjivar ended up knocking out Charlie Valencia with an elbow and ended up breaking. Like when they show the slow-mo, you can see Charlie Valencia's nose just like getting shattered by the elbow when he got knocked out. So that was a sick one. Definitely check that one out as well. You had Jake Ellenberger versus Sean Pearson. Jake Ellenberger ended up hitting Pearson with a sick left hook and knocking him out. Like Pearson just like, you know, was like falling over. You know, he got hit so hard. That was when Jake Ellenberger was up and coming. You know, he was knocking people out. You know, people knew he was a great wrestler, but he also had a lot of power in his hands. So that was a kind of like his coming out party. He had a lot of momentum after that. In the next fight, there was Rory McDonald versus Nate Diaz. This was one of like the most exciting fights ever. You know, everyone knows Nate Diaz and Rory McDonald. They always bring it. They're always in battles, wars. It's always exciting. Rory McDonald, in this fight, he ended up suplexing Nate Diaz 3 times. Like, he was just, and there were like 6 suplexes. He was just like ragdolling him like all over the cage. That was an intense fight. That was really good. Definitely watch that if you haven't seen it. This was a great one to see. Vladimir Machchenko versus Jason Brills. Vladdy, for maybe some of the newer fans don't know him, he was in the UFC for a long time. He fought everybody from Andrei Arlovsky to John Jones. Like, he's fought all the killers, you know, and he's been on the receiving end of a lot of knockouts, and it was nice this time he got the knockout. He ended up knocking out Jason Brills early in the fight, and it was really good to see someone like a veteran who went through a lot of tough fights, ups and downs. It was good to see Vladdy get a knockout win like that in the UFC. In the next fight, it was Randy Couture versus Lyoto Machida. I'm sure everyone's seen this. This is with the legendary crane kick, front kick that Lyoto lands on Randy and ended up knocking him out with it. It's a sick kick. I believe they were showing like the UFC had like a special or something with Lyoto showing like the technique of the kick. So if you haven't seen the fight, definitely watch it. I believe that was Randy Couture's last fight. That was like his retirement fight, one of many retirement fights. But I believe that was the last actual fight of his. So definitely check that out. It was a great knockout, great performance by Lyoto, especially with him fighting this weekend. You can see a classic knockout of his before the fight Saturday. In the co-main event, it was Jose Aldo versus Mark Hominick. This was a classic performance by Jose Aldo, you know, showing why he was such a dominant champion at 145, you know, solid leg kicks, good hands, you know, he did really well. Mark Hominick's also really tough. He hung in there. I believe in the 5th round, he kind of got like his second wind, you know, he was turning it on Jose. Aldo was definitely like slowing down later in the fight, and he was starting to pick it up a bit. Aldo won the decision, but it was good to see Mark Hominick. Like he showed how tough he was, and his that he's not going to be put away easily. He's a tough guy, and he put on a great performance in that fight. In the main event, it was GSP versus Jake Shields. This was a great fight. Also, if you haven't seen the countdown, I believe they have the countdowns on Fight Pass too. You can always watch the countdown with Jake Shields and GSP leading up to this. This was a great fight. There was a great build up to it. GSP, fighting in Canada, the fans love him. This was an epic fight. Jake Shields was a top welterweight for a long time. He even fought at middleweight in Strikeforce. He beat Dan Henderson in Strikeforce. So some of you who might not be familiar with Jake Shields, he was a top guy, and GSP had a lot of respect for him and his skills. And this was a great fight. All around, UFC 129 was like one of the best events of all time. Like they had the UFC. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. And if you have seen it and just haven't watched it since it aired, and it's been a few years, definitely go back and watch it. You'll definitely enjoy it. There's a lot of great moments in it that are a lot of fun. That'll do it for this week's episode. Subscribe to the channel to see when there are new ones released, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.